Okay, so we've made our storyboard. We've got a couple of labels that are just really for show. They're just showing us the 4 possible answers. We have our text field in which the user will type in his guess rather. We're going to have a start new game button which will load up a random answer in the simulator. And then of course we have our check answer button which we will press each time the user types in one of these answers. We've got our number of guesses label to keep track of how many guesses we've made, and we're going to score according to that. We're also going to have the number of games a person has played, and here's our individual score, and our message label will declare whether we are right or wrong. So this is fine, this looks all good, but we need to write our code over here in something called viewcontroller.swift. And if I click on that, it just comes up with a lot of stuff written in it. And let's go back into main.storyboard. This does not know where to get its information from. It's just a storyboard. So the view controller actually is where we write all of its code. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go back into main.storyboard. I'm going to close out the right-hand pane. I'm going to go over to this interlocking circle, which is the second from the left, which is our assistant editor. So we're going to click on that. And now we can see a side-by-side view. Here is our storyboard, and here is our viewcontroller.swift, in which we're going to write all of our code that handles the storyboard. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to go down to our text field. I'm going to hit your control button, click and drag, and you'll start to see that blue line. And I'm going to drop it right under this line that says Class View Controller and hit release. Now the connection is an outlet, which we want to have that remain an outlet. I'm just going to call this guess field, sort of a combination of our guess text field. The type is UI text field, which is going to remain that. The storage is strong. We're not going to change that, and we're going to hit the connect button. All right, you just created your first variable in Swift, which is an outlet, which means it's going to show something. And when something is done, it's going to somehow show us or give us some information. We called it guess field, so when we need to refer to it later on, that's what we will refer to it by. The next thing is our start new game. So I'm going to do, No, I'm not going to do the buttons yet. Let's continue on with our labels, okay? So our number of guesses label, I'm going to click on that. I'm going to, again, hit press my control button, click and drag, and I'm going to put that right under my first guess field variable. And again, same thing, it's an outlet. I'm going to call this guess label. It's type UI label, because remember we dragged out labels, and we're just going to hit connect, leave the outlet as it is, and also storage set to strong. All right, we're going to do it 3 more times. We're going to click on number of games. Click and drag it over here. Control click and drag it. I'm just going to call that games label. UI label. Everything else is fine. Hit connect. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room. I'm going to hit the score label. And you guessed it. I'm going to call this score label. Perfect. Hit connect. Finally, our 4th and final label. I'm going to control click and drag that. And I'm just going to call that answer label. Okay, so we have just set up all of our outlets. We have this text field, which we need to grab the information from that. And then we're based on whether it's the correct answer or not, and the number of guesses, we're going to change the text that's in these labels to reflect that. Now, let's go back up to our buttons. So I'm going to click on the Start New Game button. I'm going to control click and drag. This time, this is going to be an action. I'm going to control, click, and drag this down to the bottom of our file so far and release. Make sure it's within this last closing curly brace. This time, the connection is not an outlet. It's actually going to be an action. Something's going to happen when we press this. And I'm just going to call this new game. So that's going to be, how about new game BTN for button? New game button. You can leave type as any type. The event is touch up inside, which is basically saying that the user has touched on it with his finger or something and then released it. If you click on this, there's a whole lot of options here. For the most part, and I know for this tutorial, indeed, that we're only going to use the touch up inside. So we're going to leave that set to its default and the argument, just leave it set as sender and hit connect. But most importantly, make sure you change this connection to action. Click that and you can see we've now set up an IB action, which is actually a function called new game button. And in here, we're going to write all of our code that we need to write whenever the user taps on that button. Let's go to the last button, click on the check answer, control click and drag. Again, it's below the previous function, but still within the last curly brace, release. Change that to action, and I'm going to call this check answer BTN for check answer button. Again, action, check answer button, any object. You can leave it as touch up inside and leave the argument as sender. Connect. Okay, we have just set up all of our outlets. And if you go over and hover over these black dots, it'll show you what is connected to what. All right, that's a great point of reference. Now these labels we did not drag over here because we're not changing them. If you wanted to get a little bit more advanced, and I've got a whole full course that deals with randomizing things and dealing with arrays and pulling out all kinds of fun things. But for this purpose, we're just going to leave these as a static set. These buttons are not going to change, and they're not even buttons. They're just labels. Okay? Well, let's move on to the next lecture.